On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, today was supposed to be all about previewing the draft lottery and one last keep or convey debate, but the WNBA is coming to Toronto. We got to talk about that. In the words of the late, great Bob Cole, everything is happening.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, May the 10th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link is in the description of the podcast. It's free to join, and it's wonderful. It's a great little family we got building around the show. Great place to come talk ball, react very, very excitedly to the news that the WNBA is coming to Toronto, all that good stuff. Come be part of our listener family on the Discord. Again, link in the description, always free to join. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcasts, on your favorite podcast apps, on the audio side of things. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Always appreciated there. You can also find us on YouTube. Go to the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel, hit subscribe, and hit the little notification bell. You get a push notification every single time the show is about to premiere or go live, so you never miss a second. You can join the live chat with the little sickos in there and be a sicko yourself. We love the sickos. The sickos are what make the world go round here at Locked On Raptors HQ. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to 100 bones. All right, on today's show, we are going to talk about Sunday's draft lottery and revisit the keep versus convey debate that has ripped apart Toronto Raptors fandom for the last 6 months and hopefully will not do so for another whole calendar year. We're also going to talk very, very excitedly, as we were in the Discord earlier, about the WNBA coming to Toronto, and we'll do it with today's guest from, all over the damn place, but most recently announced the CEBL and their many, many broadcasts, both on streaming and, of course, on TSN. My buddy, we'll be calling games together down in Niagara. Can't wait. Yeah. It's Es Baraheni. How's it going, brother?
What's up? What's up? How you doing? I'm good. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, I'm excited, man. Going to be a fun summer for CEBL. This feels like summer basketball is really on the up and ups in Toronto. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the wintertime stuff, not so hot. Might as well balance it out with really cool, fun stuff in the summertime. No doubt. We'll probably talk about the CEBL at some point this summer because we're little CEBL piggies. We can't get enough. But today, we're going to talk about the WNBA at the top. We will get into the keep versus convey thing. It's a really fun little episode here because those who listen to the show know that I am staunchly on team. It's better for the Raptors to convey this pick to the Spurs this year than not. S is on the other side of things. It's a little odd couple. It's a little sitcom. Oh, baby, play the music. S's team keep the pick. So we'll get into the arguments for and against and why I'm right coming up a little bit later on in the show. But let's start off, S. WNBA reported this morning by Shireen Ahmed over at CBC. Very, very exciting. 2026, an expansion franchise in the WNBA will be coming to Toronto. They'll be playing at a Coca-Cola Coliseum down at the X Grounds. 8,000 seat capacity. What were your reactions? What was your first response other than woo?
Yeah, pretty much. No, honestly, that you have the energy on lock for what I felt. I mean, it was like 5:30 in the morning when the news dropped, so everybody was kind of asleep, and then I woke up at 7 because I'm still dealing with a bit of a cold and getting over it because I was exhausted from just whatever. But hey, great reason to wake up because I saw the WNBA expanding to Toronto. And honestly, man, we probably should have seen this coming when Teresa Resch was obviously leaving the Raptors. She's the vice president of basketball operations, longtime vice president of basketball operations for the Raptors, moved on to Kilmer Sports with Larry Tannenbaum. And once that happened, it felt like the wheels were in motion to eventually get to this point. Didn't know we would get to this point this quickly, but hey, that's awesome. 2026. I'm already looking at like WNBA mock drafts for 2026.
Juju Watkins, baby. Juju Watkins, let's go.
Juju Watkins, Flau'jae Johnson also on. Like, there's so many just like crazy athletes. Obviously, if you've been watching college, like women's college basketball, you know some of the names that might be there in 2026. It's just an exciting time. It honestly is just incredible. It feels like it was inevitable once those sold out games happened in Toronto and this year in Edmonton. It's a super, super big moment for not only for the city of Canada, the city of Toronto, but Canada and Canadian basketball.
The country of Toronto. That's how it should be, baby. Yeah, man, it's pretty thrilling stuff. Always great when you can wake up to Ed Rogers having egg on his face in the morning as well. That's a delicious little cherry on top of this whole thing. Yeah, it's, again, this felt like it was on its way as early as this summer with the reporting that came out a couple of months ago about Larry Tannenbaum's sort of ambitions with his Kilmer Sports Holdings or whatever ghoulish corporate name it has. Who cares about that? But yeah, Teresa Resch stepping aside from the Raptors, as I guess like the third in charge, more or less. Yeah. You don't do that lightly. And so it did feel like something was coming down. And obviously you had the Edmonton game last weekend with just incredible attendance and the sort of fervor around women's basketball rolling the way it is. It feels like the perfect time. And it is super duper exciting, man. I don't know what else to say. I'm already like talking about trying to find season ticket bundles with friends and stuff. It's I feel like it's going to be an absolute home run of a franchise. I feel like in very short order it's going to become one of the highest earning franchises and all of that in the WNBA. And maybe overdue, but and obviously the way MLSE dropped the ball on their original sort of flirting with this, maybe it cost them a year, maybe it made it seem unlikely for a while, but shout out to Larry Tannenbaum and his group for pulling this together. And man, just I'm so stoked.
Yeah.
The name. We got to talk about the name. This is the topic du jour today because, obviously we don't know a whole lot about the details. So we jump to the easy stuff, which is team names. Right. Can I just get this out of the way?
You don't like Huskies. I saw it.
You're right. It's bad. I've put this out there. Love our friend Kayla Gray, who suggested Huskies earlier on Twitter. And a few people have also kicked that name around. Can we not do the Toronto Huskies thing? This is my impassioned plea to do something better, do something more creative, not use a men's basketball team name to name the women's team. Also, Huskies is the most elementary school ass team mascot of all time. My elementary school was the Huskies.
Oh, that's
bad
why.
Jerseys, bad logos, everything. It wasn't just mine though. Like half of the schools in our division were the Huskies. It's just, it's lazy. It's like calling a team the Bulldogs. Right. I think it's got to be something else. Do you have as strong an opinion on this as I do, Wes?
So I originally was pro Huskies. When I woke up this morning at 8, whatever, I was very pro Huskies, but I've heard the arguments against it. And I understand the idea of like giving the women's team its own identity, its own name. Mm-hmm. Don't like bring something from the past. Let's start anew. In terms of suggestions, I haven't heard a good one yet, to be honest with you. There's like Toronto Loons. Someone said Toronto Loons. I'm not sure.
Like our pal Pascal Propaganda shared those mock-ups. Yeah.
Is that, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I believe it. Yeah, that's a cool suggestion. I'm not really sold on that though. Toronto Towers is a favorite for people. Again, not really sold on that. Someone said Toronto 6, which I believe was the old hockey team here.
It was.
If I'm not mistaken. And again, that team folded last year. Maybe that makes sense. I could see that. That works. But again, not really sold. So I don't know if there's anything that like catches the eye. And I was literally born the year the Raptors were made. So I wasn't there when, people were debating between Raptors and whatever the hell else was there. I don't know. I don't know how we go about this. How would we civilly decide what the Toronto WNBA team will be called?
Oh, it won't be civil. It'll be whatever like some corporate ghoul in a marketing conference room says is the most for making money, the most good for making money. Yeah. But I have one suggestion. I've had this one for like kind of a few years now that I've tossed out, just kind of, maybe could be the idea. I think I've softened a little bit on it, mostly because of like the climate change connotations, but the Toronto Smoke. People call it the Big Smoke. People
Do
apparently
we?
love sports. I mean, it's technically on the team on the like the Wikipedia page for the city's nicknames. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I think just like most cities that got big in the early 1900s are called the Big Smoke. Just
Right.
locally, I think London might be also just because of again emissions, and so there's that.
Right.
But I just like I love the idea of like you don't want that smoke being like a team like motto. That sounds
I don't
fun to
hate
me.
that. I don't hate
The
that.
league, I mean, like I hate this, but all of sports apparently just can't get enough of non-pluralized sports team names, and so it would fit right in with the
Yeah,
WNBA
smokes.
and the 17 of the 20 names that are proposed for the Utah hockey team. So it would fit in nicely there. I don't know. I've softened on it a little because I understand the reasons not to do it. But like, think of the dry ice effects you could do in the arena to enhance the game ops experience. Toronto Smoke, put it on the board. It might not win, but I think it should be at least considered because
I like it.
My ideas are good, of course.
I don't hate that. That's the first one where I've said, meh, okay, I see it, I enjoy it. Yeah, that would be in the lead for me right now. That would be in the lead for me. I have I don't know if I have a great idea like you do for what would be the Toronto WNBA team. I don't.
No one does, my friend.
I don't like the whole numbers connotation thing, like 6s or 9s or whatever.
No.
I'm not a big fan of that. Like, let's
also
change
6
it up.
makes sense in hockey because there are 6 players on the ice for each team when you factor in a goalie. Not so much with basketball, if you haven't heard.
But the fans are the 6th man, Sean, or people, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, whatever.
We can do better, I think.
Go
back to some of the names from the Raptors' original team name, some of the ones that were turned down. Scorpions, fine. T-Rex, you could do dinosaurs across the board. Tarantulas, terriers. You mentioned towers. You got dragons, bobcats. None of those. Let's just leave that entire name pool out of it. I think is kind of the answer here. Of course, you could always go the way certain NBA writers who have really dumb brains want to go and just call them the W Raptors, right? That would be cool. That's normal things to think.
I expect even more moronic takes to kind of just pop up as we get closer to the. Yeah, that was an idiotic take. Whoever I can't. What is it?
We don't need to name the names because they're dumb. We'll come back on the other side. We will leave it there for now. Very exciting stuff. Obviously,
Toronto Smoke.
WNBA talk to come. Toronto Smoke. Chelsea Light's going to be on next week. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in depth as well. Very excited about that. Talk about sort of the things, the dominoes that fell, that paved the way for this to actually happen. Chartered flights, anybody? That was, I think, maybe like the clue earlier this week that maybe it was on its way. But we'll save that for next week when Chelsea's on the podcast. We're going to come back on the other side and we're going to get into the great debate of our time one last time, hopefully. And hopefully this is not something we have to do a whole bunch next year. If it will, hey, that's more content days covered off for me, but I would prefer to not do it. Keep versus convey. We will examine the arguments for and against coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, the single best place to play daily fantasy sports. Highly recommend you go check them out right now because it's the simplest way as well. It's just more or less. That's all. You're picking more or less on 2 or more player stats on a given night of games and watching the winnings roll in. It is wonderful. You can get on the playoff action right now, win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during the NBA postseason. Of course, some big games going on tonight. You've got the Wolves and the Nuggets in one of the most shocking series I've ever seen play out. Maybe you can take more on Nikola Jokic buckets. Maybe they'll actually pull something out, or you could take the less on Jamal Murray buckets, and maybe that'll work too, because that defense from Jaden McDaniels and company is pretty ridiculous. It's super easy. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks right now. Go check out America's #1 fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDINNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Go check it out again. That's Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDINNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Today's show is also brought to you by our pals over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, back at it here with Es Baraheni as we continue to break down the constant debate that has been a through line of the podcast throughout this season. I was set for this thematic sort of string to end potentially this weekend. You know, it's like when one of your favorite characters on a show dies. It's a bit of a finality coming up this weekend, hopefully, when it comes to the NBA draft lottery. I've made my point pretty clear on this show many times before, and I will do that again in the last segment of the show and detail why I think the Raptors, any Raptors fan out there, should be rooting for the Raptors to convey their pick to the Spurs and fall out of the top six. But S, we'll give you the floor right now. A refresher of kind of where things sit before we do that. The Toronto Raptors currently have the sixth best odds in the lottery. They have a 9% chance at the number one pick, 9.2% at the number two pick, 9.4% at the number three pick, 9.6% at the number four. They have an 8.6% chance of staying where they are at number six. And then the biggest odds here are them dropping out entirely. 29.8% chance they pick seventh and convey it to the Spurs. 20.5% at eighth. Some minuscule percentages for ninth and 10th if multiple teams jump them. So S, let's get to it, man. You are on the side of team keep the pick. Tell me why that is your official stance here in the great debate of our time. Oh, I've got you muted. Sorry.
Admittedly, I am not the best guy to debate in this. And I say that because I am about as centrist as they come when it comes to this debate, because
Stop the pod. We got to get someone with stronger takes on.
Sorry. I can see both sides. But that being said, I'll stick to the keep side of things because for the sake of great content here. Okay, for the keep side, my main argument is the Raptors will have to pay Scotty Barnes likely this fall. They'll have to pay Emmanuel Quickly likely this summer. RJ Barrett is on contract for the next 3 years. They have Jakob Poeltl. For the most part, it is very, very important to add lottery level, high quality talent to this team. Whether that is this year, whether that is next year, it doesn't really matter. But adding a potential top 4 or a 6th pick will really, really elevate the young core of this team. Now, I understand that this group isn't necessarily, this draft class isn't necessarily the creme de la creme. It isn't the cream of the crop here. But at the same time, adding a talent at this point in time, when you know those extensions are kicking in, is going to be super helpful for building this core moving forward. And it also gives you another, asset, if you will, for a future if you decide to potentially move, go big fish hunting, whatever it is. That being said, I think the other main argument for keeping is that initially my thought is, all right, well, this class is sort of, we had this conversation off air as well a little bit, but it's sort of just all over the place. Like from 5 to 35, you can essentially, like you said, sort of pick whoever you want and wouldn't be that crazy to go out and say, hey, I want this player who is maybe projected in the teens, but I'm going to take him at 6. You have to find your guy. And I think I trust the Toronto Raptors to find the guys in this draft because, look, even in the Scotty Barnes, Jalen Suggs debate, in 2021, I think even though Suggs has really turned himself into a great player, they've sort of won that debate here in terms of the overall trajectory of their careers and whatnot. And so I trust them to find the special talent in this draft and to be the scouting department that they've been touted out to be. So if they do get a top pick, I think they will end up getting a special talent and avoid the bust, the role player, whatever you want to call it, that potentially might be. So I trust the Raptors to be able to make a good pick here. And also adding that talent at this point in time will really, really help, build this core out for the future, especially in the short term.
I hear all of that. I do think the argument of just like getting a guy now into the system, it gives you a head start on growing him into a meaningful part of your Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, et cetera, core. I think that's a pretty good just sort of place to start from. Instead of waiting a year, you get him in and you're that much closer to them becoming a productive winning basketball player, which, as we know, for most rookies takes 2, 3, 4 years for that to actually take place. So you get a head start on that here. Yep. I also hear you on the idea of, just kind of having a lot of shots, having an early shot to just go pick your guy. I'm with you. I think the Raptors have shown that they don't really give a damn about the sort of consensus projections, and they'll take guys they believe in. We saw it with Scotty Barnes. We saw it with Pascal Siakam. Like, we've seen it plenty of times before with this front office. And given 3 shots in the top 31 of this draft, which is light on high-end talent, but probably pretty good looking when it comes to like role player depth, I think that's a pretty good bet that they will find at least a couple guys between a top 6 pick, number 19 and 31, to turn into actual pieces going forward. I think where I start to lose it a little bit is just with the strength of the class and the sort of bigger picture, longer term implications of having the pick hanging over their head once again going into next year.
And that's why I'm a centrist. Yeah, that's why I'm because I tend to agree with you on that front, but sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's cool. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more, but that to me is the sort of drawback there. I also think, another element of this is, you talk about adding to this core. I don't know if this is like, I think this is such a different kind of rebuild than most teams. Like, this is not a tear it down to the studs thing. This is not a trying to find your fulcrums of your team thing. Like, it seems like they know internally, we want Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickly to be our 2 main pillars going forward. RJ Barrett probably figures into that as well if he can replicate what he did this season. And I actually feel pretty good about what he did this year, while incredible, being pretty sustainable considering the change in his role and all of that. And so for me, like, I don't think it's gotta be that you find that next bit of talent via the draft. I think this is the kind of team that you could absolutely go and add to via trade and still feel pretty good. Yeah, the expensive thing hangs over you, but I also think like Scotty Barnes is going to be on the fun max. Emmanuel Quickly is going to be on probably what will end up being a pretty reasonable deal, perhaps a huge value deal, just because that's what happens with RFAs. Yeah. It sucks for RFAs, but the league is set up for RFAs to get kind of squeezed. And I do think there's a real chance that Quickly is going to give you like close to max level production on what will be half a max level contract. Like, that's, I think, an important thing here. And RJ Barrett, obviously, for 3 more years is under contract at a reasonable number if he produces like he did, and probably a surplus number or whatever whatever language you want to use to say it's a team friendly deal.
Yeah. No longer a toxic asset.
Certainly not. Yeah, not at all.
Someone tried to say in January when that trade happened.
Love those anonymous execs. They're really, really insightful. I think we should listen to all of their. I'd like to listen to podcasts full of just anonymous execs.
Yeah, they have the morphed voice and everything.
I think Nikola Jokic is actually wildly overrated. No, give me that podcast for sure. But yeah, I think I lost my train of thought, but because of the way the team is situated, because they have their guys, it seems this is not something where like a team needs to be in the top end of the draft to go and get guys who are going to be their future, like, offensive orchestrators, the fulcrums of what they're doing. And so I don't think it has to be just via the draft they can go about talent addition. And I do think this summer might be their last real shot to go and make serious ads before everyone gets expensive. And so that's kind of where I want to leave things off for a sec. Come back on the other side and get into my full scale closing argument of why I think it's best if they convey. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I love Monopoly, and I'm not just saying that because the Monopoly Go is sponsoring the podcast. The board game Monopoly is an all-time fave of mine. It runs very counter to the way I typically operate day to day. I'm not much of an entrepreneur in my day-to-day life, but when that board comes out, baby, I am all about building up my portfolio of assets. It's super fun, and I love it because I get to, terrorize my friends and family when we play as well. But with Monopoly Go, you can also play with your friends in a harmonious way in timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and so much more. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. Again, it's not just that you play with your friends. You can play against your friends. It's all there. So many different ways to engage with the game and have tons of fun. And a ton of the constantly changing things include unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machines. It's all in there for you. And there's always new and timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, back at it here, closing things out here on your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors. Sean Woodley, Es Baraheni here. Of course, reminder, Locked On Sports Today 24/7 is our all-day streaming channel on YouTube with Locked On shows covering all the biggest stories in sports, tons of NBA playoff coverage from the local experts who cover these teams better than anybody else. And of course, NHL playoffs, baseball season's kicking up. Locked On women's basketball, I'm sure, will be in heavy rotation as the WNBA season gets rolling in a couple days here. Lovely stuff. Go check out Locked On Sports Today 24/7. All right, S, let's get to it. I'm the prosecutor in this case. I get the final argument in court.
Do it up.
I'm going to detail why, if you're a Raptors fan, there is simply no other way to go into this weekend than to think, man, oh man, I hope the team conveys this pick to the Spurs. Lots of different reasons. Went through a couple in the last segment, but number one, clean slate. No more pick encumbrances going forward. We don't got to play this miserable game of, are they going to keep the pick? Where's the pick going to be? Oh no, are they going to be too low to tank? How are they going to tank into the spot? Are they going to what's the strategy here? No, it's just, you never think about it again. That's, to me, like reason number one. I just never want to think about this again. Of course, talk about this draft class. It's underwhelming, and it's as underwhelming as the scouts have been saying it is for years. It's not just made out of thin air as a narrative. It's real. There's a less talented crop of players in this group, especially at the high end. In the top 6 range, you are not going to be drafting among prospects and players of the same caliber that you typically are in that range of the draft. Even if the Raptors go up to number 1, we've seen the Raptors draft number 1 in not so great draft years before. It doesn't always work out so well. There can be a bit of a curse to having a super high pick in a draft where guys are not going to, in many cases, pan out like super high picks typically do. It's not to say they can't find the right guys. I'm a big believer in Alex Sarr, for example, if they can land him with 1 or 2. But I think overall, this draft has a lot of guys who are just kind of And when you're drafting high, there's also like a pretty serious money consideration as well, right? If you're picking first, second, third, fourth, that's 11, 10, 9 million bucks you're paying to these guys. That is like a pretty significant chunk of change on your books. It cuts into the cap space plan this summer. If you want the Raptors to go and add via cap space, their cap space gets chopped by like a quarter just by having the 6th overall pick, let alone a higher pick in the draft, as the escalators for rookie salaries increase with, the closer you are to number 1. And so if you're looking around and saying, ooh, maybe they could go throw some money at Caleb Martin or something like that in free agency, that plan goes out the door because they're just not going to have a lot of money to play with. And it probably opens up bringing back Gary Trent Jr. and Bruce Brown. I'm sure people have differing thoughts on that. We'll talk about that plenty in the offseason, but that it hampers the one thing that it seemed like the Raptors were setting themselves up for, which was cap flexibility, whether to sign players or bring in players who are expensive from other teams who need to cut money because the league's landscape is shifting with the CBA. I think that's a big one. I think also, like I said, this is kind of the last time this core can really be added to without expending a member of the core long term if you're trying to go make like a big swing trade this summer. The big swing trade becomes a lot easier if all of your picks are available to you once again, because you've conveyed the pick to the Spurs. If it doesn't convey, then they're encumbered, every other year for infinity until that pick actually conveys. And I guess as the last part of this, and I think for me, someone who hates watching tanking basketball, who wants to watch a competitive season again, is they convey this Sunday and don't have to worry about giving up a seventh or eighth overall pick next year to the San Antonio Spurs, which is very much on the table with the way the league is set up talent-wise, where the Raptors sit in the league hierarchy. I think it takes away the potential carrot to do a full-on like bottom of the league Portland Trailblazers level tank job next season, because they're not going to be sitting there being like, oh damn, it's January and we have to get to the bottom 5 so we guarantee we keep this pick. I think not having that sort of incentive probably keeps them from pulling the chute and wasting another season. I'm a big proponent that wasting seasons tanking is far more damaging than it is positive in most cases, especially for a team that already has, quote unquote, their guys in the door. What is your thought on the sort of tanking thing and sort of what happens with the lottery this Sunday, sort of how that might dictate how they approach next year in terms of the level of competitiveness they want and the sort of earliness with which they might pull the chute and say, you know what, it's not for us. Let's get to the bottom 5 and really ensure that we keep this pick again.
I think a lot of that depends on what they do this summer, as much of a cop out as that might sound. I mean, if they
centrist unbelievable.
I'm a centrist, but it does really depend, because let's say they go ahead and, a lot of people like Malik Monk, whoever, like any type of big free agent. Let's say they go and add that free agent. Let's say they're like the roster that they have is fully healthy next year. They have a really, really healthy season. The Darko dynamic, they buy into it, et cetera, et cetera. I could see that being a play-in team in the Eastern Conference. Is that sort of enough for you? Is 10 to 14, really enough? And obviously if they make the playoffs, then it'll be higher than 14, but like that's sort of the level of the pick that we're looking at. Things would have to really go in the wrong direction for it to be any worse than that, in my opinion, based on what the talent is around the roster, what we can expect. Even if they add a marginal move, add a couple of rotation players, maybe get a couple of good guys in this draft, I do think that this team is going to be pretty good next season. I don't know if it is top 6 territory, especially with the way the East is shaking out and the talent pool in general, but I do think they'll be able to fight for a play-in spot. How that dictates your point about tanking will just be dependent on what they do this summer and how the landscape of the league shakes out. We talk about Atlanta, what they're going to do with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, the same thing with the Chicago Bulls and, DeMar DeRozan's free agency, Zach LaVine, how they're going to move. A couple of these play-in teams will probably have very different futures come September. And so you don't want to play that game of, oh, we're basing our whole life around some of these other teams. But at the same time, you have to envision where you're going to fall, to your point, in the pecking order of the NBA. I think regardless, they're probably going to be in that play-in range for the East. And if me and you are on the same page for that, then I think for what it's worth, it probably makes sense for them to keep the pick, because if they keep it, then they know, hey, we're going to have, a top 4 pick this year or top 6, and we're going to build towards a potential play-in or playoff team next year. The pick next year that we convey will be 10 to 15. And so I guess the value proposition we're asking here is, would it be more valuable to have a top 4 or 6th pick this year or a 10 to 15 pick next year? And I don't know enough about both drafts to tell you definitively which one is best. You might know a little bit better. You might have a solid opinion on that, but I think that probably gauges to be in and around the same. And so that's why I'm centrist. That's why I don't care.
Yeah. Hey, fair enough, man. I do think one, as much as I think, yes, like the play-in range is very much there, I also think there's totally a world in which they kind of end up in the same range they did this season.
Sure.
As much as I think like the Nets and the Bulls and the Hawks might drop back, teams behind them outside of the Wizards might stand a chance of taking a step forward as well. And so there's that to consider. There's like no bad teams in the Western Conference, notably. Like that's going to be kind of an interesting story to watch. Like how many of the top teams in the draft lottery will be Eastern Conference teams next year is kind of a fun over under. But yeah, I think to your point about, being competitive next season, I think they stand a way better chance of being competitive next season if they don't have 3 rookies they're giving rotation minutes to. Like
fair, yeah.
Rookies lose, man.
I would be shocked even if they do keep the pick. I would be shocked if all 3 of those guys are rotation players next year.
That's fair.
One is probably in the G League. One probably splits a bunch of time, and the other guy gets thrown in intermittently. But similar to the Grady Dick situation last year, where like he wasn't, first half of the season he wasn't getting any run, and then second half they went a different direction. And Cobb, obviously things changed, but I completely understand the convey and like, let's just get it over with, rip it off. Let's rip this Band-Aid off thing. But I think the idea that it's a tantalizing idea of adding a lottery level talent. For what it's worth, the 2024 draft might not have that like prototypical lottery talent. And I think that's where the debate comes. That's why so many people are split on convey or keep, because what we're gauging the value of this 2024 draft class is it's kind of a toss up. I've heard this argument. I don't necessarily know if I agree with it, but people are like, oh, the 2020 draft class was supposed to be a weak draft class. People bring it up with 2013, which was the Giannis and Rudy Gobert draft class. They're like, there are gems in every draft class. And I think that was my point earlier, where it's like, look, I trust the Raptors to find those gems. I don't know. I guess that's where I kind of land on that.
I trust them to make like good process decisions, but there's also so much luck and unknown with the draft that I do think it's like a little bit like hubristic to say, well, like we'll find the good players in this draft.
Right.
Like the Raptors didn't find the good players in that 2013 draft. Like they just didn't, right? So I guess they didn't even have a pick that draft. Thanks, Barks. Or thanks, Rudy Gay. Was that?
I think that was Rudy Gay.
It was the first back for Barks. That's right.
Yeah.
Trading a first for Barks. Imagine doing that. Crazy stuff. The Knicks.
Shout out to the New York Knicks. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think for me, I went into this draft class kind of feeling like I'm not expecting to be blown away, and maybe I've like let my bias from before kind of cloud my judgment. But like, frankly, like I don't love really any of the prospects near the top of this draft. I think there's a very real chance, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago when Rich Stamen from Locked On NBA Big Board was on the show. Like he said, it's most likely the best players in this draft don't come from the top 6 to top 10, which is like a weird thing that everyone's just like agreed. Yeah, the top 10 stinks. Like change the top 10 then. I guess it's my sort of counter to the scouting community on that. But they rank things for certain reasons and upside and all of this. I'm just not super sold on any of the prospects, and I am going to be like, if we see them move up in the lottery to anything but number 1, I'm going to be team trade back, like get as many shots as possible. And hey, maybe that's an argument for keeping it. If you have number 2, that gives you way more ammo to trade back and make some stuff happen. Maybe you can use that pick as something to go and trade for a tangible upgrade as well. Like that becomes a valuable pick. Yeah. Although if you don't view this draft as valuable, the rest of the league might also not view the league as valuable. It's tough stuff. So, I get the arguments in favor. I just think clean slate, pick encumbrance is gone. The opportunity cost of just like not having the stuff on hand to make a trade if an opportunity comes along is a big one too, right?
I honestly think that's the biggest argument to convey, because it's getting to that point for the Raptors, and you sort of alluded to this too, where it's like they sort of are who they are, like not in the sense that this is the ceiling of this team, but they sort of have their core with Scotty and IQ and RJ, and hey, however that builds out, the results we will see. But ultimately, you want to have those picks there so that you can trade and move up and add talent. And hey, if there is a superstar available or a star available, you want to have your picks available to you so that you can go out and get a Shai Gilgeous. I'm just talking out of my right now, but like, I don't know. I for what it's worth, I think that's the best sort of argument for convey. It's like, hey, clean slate, you get your picks, you can go ahead and like have a lot more draft flexibility moving forward. and that sort of rids you of some of the, I guess, stringent flex cap stuff that you have to deal with moving forward when it comes to adding a top level talent, when it comes to, you know, inserting a young guy into the roster and everything like that.
Yeah, man. Like, I don't know if it happens this summer where the Nets are like, hey, Mikal Bridges up for grabs. Like, you don't want to be in a situation where you're emptying your pockets and you got this like lint and future 2028 picks that you can finally use to throw half-heartedly at as an offer. It doesn't mean you're going to get them anyway, but having the ability to jump in and be opportunistic is kind of what this whole front office is about. And you know, we've seen it in recent years when they've thrown their name in the ring for Damian Lillard, and obviously we know what happened with Kawhi. Like, opportunism is how the Toronto Raptors tend to acquire talent. And I think having the picks on hand would be very, very nice for that. I also do think, like, if they didn't have 19 and 31, I would feel like I think it would be a way bigger hit to give up the pick. But I think because they have those 2 picks in a draft that feels pretty flat, they're going to get a couple of guys who you can sort of put some hope on. And I just think it's not, I think it's way worse optically than it is in practice that you trade the 7th overall pick in this draft for Jakob Poeltl, I guess is kind of the end story of it. If it does convey, we'll do like a Jakob Poeltl trade sort of review next week on the show. But like, I think if it ends up being the 7th pick in this year's draft for Jakob, like, that's fine. Like, I think that's value-wise a perfectly reasonable deal. And I think it feels way worse just optically to like not get that instant gratification of a high-end prospect right after a really bad season. But they have 19 and 31 to sort of soften that blow a little bit as well, and the future pick from the Pacers and all that stuff. So
how would you feel about moving up 19 and 31 to go out and get, like, let's say they love someone at, I don't know, 11. Like,
I think trading up would be a miserable idea in this draft.
Okay.
It is so flat. Like, I just have as many shots as possible. It's why I would be pro trading back, right? Just like, if you can trade back at maybe a future pick in a later draft and another one in this year's, just have as many throws at the dartboard in a very dartboardy draft as possible. I think that's the way. And I think, you know, maybe they have a guy they pinpoint, but trading up, very risky, man. I tend to kind of want to go against that, especially in the middle tier of the draft. They're trading up for a star at the top, sure. But I don't think that really exists in this draft. So just kind of see what falls to you and see what breaks and go from there. But again, I don't work in a front office. That would be a terrible idea. So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. S, this was great, man. Thanks for jumping on. Thanks for being the centrist. Thanks for of playing both sides of this coin for us. We very much appreciate it. A noble defense, I suppose, if I'm the prosecution from you in this episode. Anything you want to promote for the good people out there? I know you got a lot on the go.
I'll just say, it would be very funny if in a court of law, the defense was like, yeah, I see what the prosecution is saying. I'm there with them, you know, but at the same time, I just think that'd be funny. No, man, look, just follow me on Twitter at just Es Baraheni. Do some writing for Forbes and Sporting News. Obviously, the CEBL stuff this summer should be a lot of fun. I will see you around. And we'll see if the Raptors end up conveying or keeping.
Hell yeah, man. May 30th, I believe, is our first game working together down in Niagara as well. So everyone tune in on CEBL Plus for that, and all the other 1,000 places you can stream CEBL games now, because it's everywhere, baby. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for hanging out for a long episode. But hey, it seemed worth doing it, as there's plenty to talk about. As I said, everything is happening. We'll have an episode Sunday, by the way. I'll break down the results of the lottery just after it happens. 3 p.m. Sunday is when that's going down. I'll probably be hanging out in the Locked On Raptors Discord, maybe even do like a voice hangout or something like that. I've yet to decide, but we'll be around Sunday for sure. Reaction episodes and a lot of good stuff coming next week. Some WNBA talk. We'll do a review of the Poeltl trade if in fact the pick conveys and we have some clarity on that. But until then, thank you so much for hanging out. Go check out all S's great work. You can find me at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on your favorite podcast apps and on YouTube. Subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Always appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again on Monday, or Sunday, that is, with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Bye-bye.
Ah, damn.